The computer just froze, so that's cool. That's way too fucking bright. Okay, so as promised in my last video, I'm going to be doing a video today about my experience in a psychiatric hospital, otherwise known as a mental hospital. And the reason I'm going to be recording this and uploading it is because I kind of want to let people know that, like, it doesn't make you crazy going to a mental hospital to get help. It actually is a positive thing. It's not as scary as you think. And there's a lot of stereotypes surrounding psychiatric hospitals because of Hollywood and stuff, that there's like long white walls, creepy nurses getting strapped down, shock therapy, all that, and that's just not true. So I'm going to briefly explain why I was hospitalized in the first place, and I'm not going to go through a whole timeline. It's just going to be very brief because that would take too long, because I tried to do that in a different video and just took too long. Anyways, so basically I reached my wit's end with my anxiety and my depression and my everything. My self-harm had just intensified, and I was really, really upset, and I had been suicidal for ever at that point. It felt like forever. I had been seriously considering it, like having thoughts where I was, it was like impulses to do it rather than just thoughts, for about a year or two. And so, this was the first time that I had, like, this was not the first time, but this is the closest I'd ever come to attempting suicide and attempting to take my own life. But, my dad had called me from Florida because he was on a business trip, and he said, like, it was really random. He was just like, hey, I love you, and I just know I'm always here for you and all this stuff. And, that kind of stopped me, but because I kid you not, I don't know if I'd be here if it wasn't for that call. I think I would have, no, I know I would have followed through. But, anyways, so, I was still, like, kind of an emotional wreck, and so I decided to take some pills, and they basically made me high and sleepy all at once, and so then I decided to take them before school, which was just a fantastic idea. And so I was kind of high at school, and my mom found out because, she just did, and she pulled me out of school early, and she's like, I know you're on drugs. And I'm like, oh, shit. And so, I'm like, I do it twice, and I get in trouble. But anyways, I then kind of broke down, and I told her why I had taken them in the first place, and she's like, all right, this is too much. We need to take you somewhere where you can get help, and where I know you can be safe. And so then she decided to take me to the psychiatric hospital, the closest one in our city, and, what happened was we got there around 2:30 in the afternoon on a Thursday, and they about a half hour after we checked in, they took us back to the evaluation room where they took vitals, drug tests, checked your arms for any, like, obvious cuts or anything. They didn't, like, search you, but they just kind of saw what was on the surface that they could see. And then we waited in we waited in the waiting room for about 3 hours, and 6 o'clock on that Thursday evening, they took us back to the ER where they gave us a room with, like, a bed, and my mom had a chair, like, that reclined, and there was a TV, and then they changed me on my clothes, and they put me in scrubs, and then the police officers searched my clothes for, like, any sharps or, drugs, or I guess anything like that. Excuse me, I'm really congested. Oh my god, I'm sorry. Anyways, so after the officers did that and I changed, 6 hours later, it was midnight now, they took me back to the psych evaluation area where they basically ask you a bunch of questions, and then they determine if you need to be inpatient, which is being hospitalized for an extended stay, or outpatient, which I believe is hospitalization just during the day when you're at school because they think you'll be safe at home in the meantime, and immediately starting with a psychiatrist, therapist, etc. And they decided I needed to be hospitalized first and foremost. And so this all started on Thursday at 2:30 in the afternoon, and on Friday at 11 in the morning, they got me a bed in the psychiatric hospital wing of the hospital. Yeah, because it's like one hospital, and I talk with my hands, so ignore that. It's one hospital, separate wings. And so they got me back to the psychiatric hospital, and they took me up there, and it was just like a little kind of dormitory is how to explain it. The girls had their own side with the living room, and then the boys had their own side because they wanted to separate us, the boys and girls, and then they had a nurse's station in the middle of all that, and on the living rooms they had couches and chairs and a TV and a bunch of books and a fridge and a sink and all that stuff. And then the rooms itself were pretty plain. You had cubbies, which you could put all your clothes and stuff in, and then you had like a twin-size bed with a thin blanket, but your parents could bring you a blanket from home. So I had my parents bring me like a really big comforter, and then along the head of the beds there's a big window, and mine overlooked like the city, so it was really, really pretty, and I enjoyed looking at that at night. And then you also had a bathroom, but the nurses had to unlock it, and you shared it with the person who was in the neighboring room. And so, yeah, it's a pretty normal place, pretty normal environment. And my day, this is what my experience was, is my day is pretty structured. I woke up in the morning, and you had breakfast, and for your meals they gave you a menu the day before, and you like circled everything you wanted for each meal, and then they bring it to you the next day, obviously. And so I had breakfast, and then you went to empowerment, which basically you set goals for the day. You recognize kind of the things that you're working on. You recognize your triggers, your soothers. And at the end of the day, you will do reflection, which is where you look back on times that you were triggered, and then soothers that you used, and like if you accomplished your goals for the day and stuff. And yeah, so it was kind of cool how they did that. And then right after empowerment, you went to group therapy, and then you went to lunch, and then you went to group therapy again, and then you had room time, which for an hour you just kind of hung out in your room. A lot of people napped, but I would journal, or I would read, or I would I mostly exercised because I just did like abs, and I did legs and stuff. No equipment, just kind of doing it on my own. And yeah, so after room time, you had dinner, I believe. Yeah, you had dinner, and then you had another group therapy, and then you had reflection, and then you went to bed. So that was kind of your day. The group therapies were actually really cool because, oh my god, I'm sorry, I keep moving. The group therapies were really cool. You sometimes did like a regular therapy, like how you'd picture it. You're all sitting around talking about your feelings, I guess. And then other times it was just kind of distraction therapy in a way. We had rec therapy where we would play video games, or you could draw, or you could. I made these like those rubber band bracelets that you can make. I learned how to make those. And there was also music therapy, which did all sorts of things, like you played instruments and stuff, and it was again kind of a soothing thing. And then my favorite, which is weird because I hate art, but my favorite was the art therapy because it was really interesting how they did it. We did this one activity where you draw a picture of yourself, and mine turned out horrendously because I can't draw worth this shit. And so you drew yourself, and then you'd had to draw something that follows you. Like a lot of people drew animals that were like really vicious looking, and then in them you kind of describe what that animal is. And I did a rain cloud, like a storm, and then in each of the individual raindrops I wrote the different things that follow me around, like my eating disorder or my depression or whatever it was. I wrote those in the raindrops, and it was really cool to like kind of reflect on that from the inside and actually have a visual of it. And so the therapies were definitely helpful, I would say. And like the rec therapy and stuff, that was just fun. That just made you feel normal. As far as clothes in the hospital, our rules with clothes were you couldn't have drawstrings or hoods or zippers for obvious safety reasons. They don't want you harming yourself or trying to kill yourself. And you also couldn't have the name of your school because apparently these people that you're with all day, that you really get to know, and you're telling your innermost secrets to them, and you've never met them, like you're telling them stuff that you haven't even told your parents or your closest friends. Apparently, those people can't know what school you go to, so they say like no school names on your shirt or whatever, which I thought was weird because I still wore a shirt with my school name on it, and they didn't care. And so I think they just say that. Oops, the screen just went black. Oops. Anyways, So yeah, that was kind of a clothes rule. You also had to be modest. Nothing, no really short shorts, no really tight shirts, no belly shirts, nothing like that. No tank tops. So that was kind of the clothes rules. Some of the other rules were visiting was in the evening, like I think it was 5 to 8, and then on Sundays it was 1 to 8, and it was family only visits unless you had like a really close friend that needed to visit or something. You have to run that by with the nurses. And I just had my family visit. They brought me dinner every night, which was really nice of them, and we got to like sit down and talk, and that was really good. And phone calls were to the people only on your list. So the only people I could call was my mom and my dad. And I'd call them pretty much every night before bed. Sometimes, and they can call you as well, which is nice. So my dad usually beat me to it, and he would call me and say goodnight and all that stuff. And so, yeah, so that was the rules, like with people visiting and the phone calls. One other rule is called the 10-second rule, where if a patient's having trouble, like say somebody's having like a panic attack or something and they need privacy but they can't get them to a room, then they call 10-second rule, and you have 10 seconds basically to get to your room and shut the door. And I never went. The only time that the 10-second rule happened while I was there was when I was visiting with my family, so I just got to stay in the family room, and I didn't even really know it was happening until after I got back and the other patients told me about it. And yeah, there's also a thing called the name game, so you can't play that where you like ask about people you know and from different schools, like, hey, do you know this person, do you know that person? And we played it anyways because I never left the hospital, but we still kind of were curious. I'm trying to think of other rules. I hope that I'm explaining this well, because that basically is our day, and those are kind of the rules. The nurses have to unlock everything, including like your toiletries is what I call them, like deodorant, perfume, toothbrush, toothpaste, anything like that. They keep them in a cabinet, and they have to get that for you. They have to unlock the bathrooms. They have room checks every 15 minutes, even when you're sleeping. So they go by every 15 minutes and check, and you have to take your meds every morning before you do anything else, and yeah, they usually medicate the shit out of you, which is sucky because when I got home, I looked up what medicines I was on, and one of them was Lamictal, which is a mood stabilizer, and you're supposed to take it at night because it makes you tired, but they would give it to me in the morning along with my Zoloft because they didn't take me off my Zoloft, which I was on for like 2.5 years. So I took Zoloft and Lamictal while I was there, but the Lamictal, like, it knocked me out for the day. But one of the things is that the more you show up to group therapy and the more you participate and the more you show you're, like, willing to help yourself and stuff like that, the quicker that the more interest they'll take in trying to get you out. So I was there Friday morning to Monday evening, so it's not that long, about 4 days. And, the one thing that you have to do before you leave is you have to have you have to have family therapy. So that was kind of the one thing that kept pushing it off, is I wasn't supposed to leave until Tuesday, but they managed to fit my family therapy in on Monday night. And so my parents were able to take me home on Monday. And so that was nice. That kind of explains it. No, it's not like what you see in the movies. It's really like a dormitory setting. You're you're watched all the time, and obviously you have to go to therapy, and it's very exposing, but I think that was helpful because it showed me how sick I really was, and then it also showed me that I wasn't dealing with this alone. Like, all these other patients I was with had similar to the same issues, and so it made me feel like I'm not the only person, because that's the problem with a lot of mental illness, is that it sometimes, like especially depression, it makes you feel so alone and so negative, like that you're the only person suffering with it, when that's just not true. But it's hard to see that until you're actually put in that situation where you physically see it. And so, yeah. I mean, if you're considering like getting help, or if your parents are like wanting to take you somewhere, whether it's a therapist or whether it's a hospital, or if you're feeling like suicidal and you need to go to a hospital, do not hesitate to do it, because let me tell you, my parents were so mad at me. My mom could not shut up about how selfish I was being, about how stupid I was being, about how much trouble I was in, and all this bullshit. And my dad got home from Florida because he had to come home from his business trip early to come like handle everything. He the first thing he said is, "How could you be so selfish and cowardly? Like, this is the dumbest thing you've ever done." And so my parents went from that, and then the nurses talked to them, and it kind of brought them out of their anger, and they took a complete 180 turn, and they were the most supportive they've ever been. And my dad, who never understood mental illness, I don't think he even believed that it was a real thing until I was hospitalized. He finally was like, I get it. I don't get it, but I get that it's there, and I get that you're suffering with this, and I'm sorry. And that was probably the best thing, when he finally understood. And so no matter how mad your parents are, no matter how mad you are, it's totally worth it, because then at home I can finally open up and talk to my parents about these things. I can finally talk to my siblings. I can finally talk to a few of my friends, because I didn't really tell a lot of people about this because it is kind of a personal thing. But it's nothing to be ashamed of. Getting help, it's one of the strongest things you can do. Besides fighting it for yourself, which is strong as hell, but so hard, and eventually you might not win. These things that you are dealing with are bigger than you are. That my illnesses, my struggles, they're bigger than what I could handle, and I couldn't handle them, and that's why I wanted to take my own life, because I couldn't deal with them. And so what I realized is, after I got out of the hospital and I kind of got out of that suicidal state of mind, I realized how loved I actually was. Depression, it'll constantly tell you in your ear, like, you're not loved, you're not loved, you're not loved. All this bullshit and stuff, and it's just draining. But once you get past that suicidal state of mind, and it's a huge relief not to want to die every day. And you know what? I'm not perfect, and I'm never going to be, but I'm so much farther than what I was 3 months ago. I'm finally living. I'm struggling every day, but I'm getting my shit together. And I'm going to my therapy, and I'm talking. And I'm going to my psychiatrist, and I'm telling her the truth. I'm talking to my parents when I'm having trouble. I'm talking to other people when they're having trouble, because what I found is that the only time I'm really going to open up to somebody who I don't really know is when it will be beneficial to them. Because I know when I was going through what I was, and even now, it's still comforting to know that other people are dealing with it too, because it makes you feel less alone, and it makes you feel like, okay, that person's standing, they're still here, I can do it too. And it's nice to have somebody to vent to as well. I in the past, I've tried to be people's therapist, which I can't do, but I can tell them, like, I've lived it. It's gonna be okay. And so, yeah, I hope this video kind of explained what it's like being in the psychiatric hospital, some of the rules, kind of my experience with it. And I also hope it makes you realize that it's okay. It doesn't make you crazy going to this hospital. It doesn't make you crazy going to therapy. It doesn't make you crazy going on medicine. It makes you it makes you strong, because you're taking that first step to getting better and to getting your life together. And that is such a huge accomplishment. And it's so sad how many people still suffer because they can't get help, because they won't get help. I promise you, it is worth it. And I promise you, what is not worth it is taking your own life. It is absolutely not worth harming yourself. It is absolutely not worth taking your own life. I've been there. I get it 110%. I promise you, from the bottom of my heart, it is not worth it. And I want each and every one of you who's watching this video, if you are feeling any sort of anxiety or any sort of depression or any sort of suicidal thoughts, or you're self-harming, or you have an eating disorder or mood issues, or whatever you're dealing with, please get help. I'm going to pray for each and every one of you that you decide to, because it is so worth it. I can't stress that enough. I love each and every one of you. Even if I don't know you and you don't know me, doesn't matter. I still care about you. That's one person. That's one person out of many that cares about you. So I hope that this video was beneficial. We're nearing 20 minutes now, so I'm going to stop this, but I hope you all have a good day.